Hello and welcome back to part 3 in our Working in 360 Premiere series. So in the last video we created this little cover image here that covers our tripod, and we basically just have our two clips here that we've already added an offset to. So what we're going to be looking at in this video is how to apply graphics or text to our scene in Premiere. Now a few little notes on this. I personally wouldn't do it this way. I would personally use After Effects, that's because that's the kind of pipeline I'm in, but we can do it within Premiere entirely. We just have to kind of be aware of some of the limitations and some of the extra steps we need to follow. So down here you see we've got our two clips here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lock these two layers. So I'm going to lock my cover and my video clips just so I don't accidentally move them when I start adding in my own elements. I've also right-clicked here and added a new track, so I've just got an extra video track layer here. And again, like Photoshop and After Effects and all those other Adobe programs, whatever layers at the top is what is shown first. So just bear that in mind, everything kind of sandwiches on top of each other. Okay, so now that out of the way, I'm just going to select my sequence and I'm going to go to Graphics and I'm just going to add some text. This is where I could choose my font style, so I could choose an appropriate font for the kind of piece I'm working on. And again, I could spend a while on this if I really wanted to, so I could go with some quite gothic looking if I really wanted to. And we might do that. Let's see, that's a bit too thin. I want something a bit thicker just to make it a bit more apparent what I'm doing. Okay, that'll do. So we've got my text. I'm going to double click on my text and I'm just going to write Castle Square because that's where this is. Okay, I can also adjust the fill. So this is the color of my text. So if I highlight on my text and click on here, I can choose what color I want my font to be. I can also choose whether it has a background or stroke, etc. Again, I'm not going to go too much into this. I'm just going to align this though to the center of my text. And in order to be able to distort our text or graphic, we're going to need to convert our element into a 360 format, or a projection mode needs to be applied to it. So at the moment, you'll notice that our scene has a sort of pinched sky, pinched sort of ground. Everything in the middle kind of looks all right, but as we start looking up, we start to get this barrel fisheye kind of going on. And we need to basically tell Premiere that our graphics, our text, or whatever elements we're adding to it also need to conform to this projection mode. So it's a little bit convoluted how we have to do this, so please bear with. But I'm going to go over to my Essential Graphics option. And again, if that's not there, you can go to Window and search for Essential Graphics here. And I'm just going to make sure I've got my text selected. I'm going to select my text under the Edit options here, so you should see this appearing. And I'm going to just align this to the vertical center, so vertical and horizontal in the middle. And what I need to do is every element that I'm going to start to apply a VR projection to, or 360 projection to, ideally I need to try and center it to the beginning of my scene. So the center of my scene here, and it just means it just makes it a bit more easy to work with. I'm just going to highlight a quick point first before I go any further. So for example, if I just move my text here and go to my VR projection, if I look here, you can start to see it starting to curve. The kind of closer it gets to the edges, the more the curve becomes noticeable. So if I was to scale my text down a little bit, it starts to look a little bit more straight, less kind of barreled. But if I was to increase my size of my text, you'll notice it's curving more and more as it gets closer to the edges, which again is something we really want to avoid. Likewise, if I was to move my text to the sky and look up, you'll notice that the curve starts to get tighter. And again, that's because the top of and bottom of a sphere starts to pinch more. The radius is smaller, the circumference is tighter. The other thing you'll notice is when my text is actually there, you'll notice that within the VR projection mode, the box for the text is over here. So we do not want to be moving text within the VR projection mode. We don't want to be moving any graphical elements within the projection mode. We are using this just to preview. Every time we move anything, we want to do it in this standard view here. I'm just going to center this again to the middle, so I want to make sure that everything is centered to the center of my scene when I'm applying VR projection. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to Effects, and I'm going to look under Video Effects, and under Video Effects, let's just remove it that way, there we go. There should be a thing called Immersive Video, and there's a effect called VR Plane to Sphere. I'm going to drag this onto my text, and you'll notice that straight away my text is sort of shrunk. That's because it's sort of scaled the radius down to 60. If I was to scale this up to, let's say, 100 again, that will kind of bring it back closer to the original scale it was. I could still scale my font here, but again, you'll start to notice that now it's starting to sort of, again, distort, but this time it's kind of curving the opposite way. So now it's curving the opposite way. I'll go back to my VR view just to show you. Again, it looks perfectly straight there. But if I was to kind of move this text element up into the sky, you'll start to notice that as I get to a certain position, it kind of starts to disappear because the sphere doesn't quite fill our entire scene. So we really don't want to be moving things using our move tool or selection tool. We want to now start moving things using the effect controls. I'm just going to scale my text back down again to about 100 just to try and keep it flat in this view. And I'm going to look at these two options here, one called Rotate Source and one called Rotate Projection. So the rotating of the source basically just rotates our text. So I can start playing around with angles, and again, everything's got a stopwatch next to it I could keyframe. But what I'm actually interested in is the rotate projection as a method of moving our text. So if I move things on the z-axis, it starts to rotate it around like so. But if I move things on the x-axis, you'll notice it's moving it up and down. And as I move up, it curves more and more. If I move it down again, it curves. So again, this is now kind of rotating around inside a sphere of its own. So I want this castle square to be up in the sky. I'm going to use the projection pan to move it over to this side. Again, because I'm moving it this way, you start to see it's now starting to rotate and curve around. So I'm going to need to just adjust my roll. And again, I'm now going to need to just play about with these values. Again, I wish I could say, use these values. These values are, the ones you should be entering. But again, this very much depends on your sort of source material that you're working with. Okay, so it's kind of getting where I want it to be. There we go. So now you can notice I've got this kind of curved text here above the building. It looks a bit weird here, but if I go to VR display and now look up above the sky, you should now see that this should be now a flat piece of text. It's looking a bit weird because it's looking like the text is looking down on me, which isn't quite what I want. So to fix that, I can just adjust the rotate source. So I can use the tilt to kind of angle it a little bit more that way. I can also use the roll to just correct it a little bit here. And we're basically now using a combination of the rotate source and rotate projection within the VR view to kind of get looking the way we want it to look. It's a little bit complex, it's a little bit convoluted, it's not a great way of doing it. If you really are struggling, another way would be to do it in a similar method as we did for our kind of patch down here. So when we create the nadir patch, we opened up Photoshop from a still reference that we took in Premiere. Then we created a new layer and we applied the text, graphics, etc. on that layer as a PNG transparency, and we just dragged it as a new layer above here. So we could do it that way. Just to prove that this also works with graphics, I'm going to just bring a image in. So in this case, I brought my logo in. I'm going to scale my logo down a little bit. And if I was to view this in 360, at this kind of midline, it looks perfectly fine, because again, everything that's within our horizontal line doesn't get distorted heavily. This is the kind of general camera height. This is where things are kind of captured at a sort of one-to-one scale. But if I was to try and move this up or down, and then look at it in VR view, it would start to again not behave like I'd expect it to. So I'm just going to move this into the middle, apply my plane to sphere to it. And I'm going to again use the rotate projection, rotate source controls just to adjust its position. So let's move this kind of down a bit. I'm going to up the scale a bit to 100. You notice that when I'm kind of moving it down here, it's actually starting to kind of wrap within its own container. So there are some limitations with using graphics to be aware of. So let's move my text down here a bit. Okay, so as you can see, I can apply graphics, but it is a little bit more complex. So again, I'd probably not do my kind of majority of my graphic work within Premiere. I would probably actually more likely use, to be honest with you, After Effects. That just means that I've got more control over my elements. Also, another thing to bear in mind is if we had any movement, so if I was to, let's say, have my offset for my 360 camera moving, I'd also need to copy those properties across to every element that I want to follow it. Otherwise, these elements would stay in position when my camera's moving and it wouldn't look right. So again, you can do these things in Premiere. And again, for sort of shots where the camera's not moving or quite static and you just want to add basic text or basic imagery, Premiere Pro can do it. If you want to start going down the rabbit hole of 360 and having kind of more accurate tracking, better mapping, then you really need to go down at the After Effects route. So we will continue this series and I'll see you again next time. Bye.